So the arterioles are extremely important in being able to affect total peripheral resistance and in turn being involved in the control of blood pressure as a whole around the body. And of course that's extremely important clinically, because if someone's blood pressure is too high or too low, you might look to the arterioles as being a way to fix that problem. However, arterioles don't all respond together. And the other thing that the arterioles can do is they can control the flow locally. You can send more blood where you need it and divert blood away from where you don't need it. Now, consider this situation here. We have a blood vessel which is dividing and it's sending blood to lots of different organs. We have the muscle, the gut, the brain, and the kidney. Now let's imagine that you're exercising. If you're exercising, what you would really like is for more of the blood to go to the muscle. Unfortunately, there's a good way to achieve that, because when the muscle's exercising, it produces the various metabolites that I referred to earlier. And they will cause vasodilatation in the arterioles, and that will allow more of the blood to go through to the muscle. Which metabolites are involved? Well, it's almost anything that you care to think of that you might imagine would change if a muscle became more active. So, you might think, well, carbon dioxide levels would rise. You might think lactic acid would increase. You might think oxygen levels would drop. And all of those things will result in metabolic vasodilatation. There are some things which are slightly less obvious. For example, adenosine causes vasodilatation, and that's also a metabolic byproduct. Then we have potassium. When muscles contract, they do so because a lot of action potentials are occurring within those muscle fibers, and during every action potential, a little bit of potassium is released. And the potassium ions, which build up in the extracellular fluid, they can result in vasodilatation as well. The increased temperature within the muscle, that can result in vasodilatation too. So lots of things occurring, which are just occurring naturally, if you like, during exercise, can cause the arterioles to dilate, and that means that more blood would go through the muscle. But imagine that that's all that happened. Skeletal muscle in your body represents something like 40% of your body mass. And if you were using all of your muscles at once, and as a result you were getting metabolic vasodilatation in all of those arterioles, that's a lot of arterioles. If they were all to dilate at once, total peripheral resistance would drop, and the danger there is that your blood pressure could drop as well. So it might be quite a good idea if we could find a way to offset that vasodilatation by causing constriction somewhere else. And during exercise, this is often what happens. So as the muscle blood vessels dilate because of the metabolites, so you might cause constriction of the blood vessels to the gut. And that would work in the arterioles as well. It would probably be mediated by the sympathetic nervous system, but if those ones constrict while the muscle blood vessels dilate, the hope is that the total peripheral resistance wouldn't drop too much, the body would be able to cope, and what you've essentially done here is you've diverted blood to the muscles from the gut. Now in the long term, you're going to have to send blood to the gut again when you're having a meal, and under those circumstances the situation might reverse. But the point is that you can control your arteriole beds appropriately according to circumstance. And what they're trying to do is to balance two requirements. The local requirement for more blood where it's needed, together with the global requirement across the body as the whole to make sure that total peripheral resistance doesn't drop too low, which would be difficult to deal with in terms of its effect on blood pressure. So there's always some sort of compromise going on within blood vessels, the local control against central control. I often think of this as being analogous to local government and central government. If you imagine how a city is run, the local government within the city are asking for more money. They're saying we need more money for the roads and for the infrastructure and for the dustbin collection. But central government says, well, you can have a little bit more money, but perhaps you can't have as much as you want. We're going to ration the money because there are other cities and other councils that want that money as well. So you have a bit of a compromise between local demands and central availability of resources. And it's a similar thing with the cardiovascular system. So locally, your muscles might say, we want more and more blood because we're exercising, but the body as a whole might say, well, careful, we can't just give you all of the blood because then we'd have a problem elsewhere. That problem would be a reduction in blood pressure, and as a result, we're going to limit your dilatation. Now, the way that this would actually work is that if too many muscles around the body were clamouring for more blood, in other words, if there was a lot of metabolic vasodilatation going on, and the danger is that your blood pressure would drop too much, then the sympathetic nervous system would kick in and it would perhaps override some of that metabolic vasodilatation, so that the blood vessels are still dilated, but they're not dilated as much as they would otherwise be. So the muscle is getting more blood, but perhaps it's not getting quite as much as it would want under ideal circumstances. Now, if that happens, if the muscle isn't getting quite enough blood, the danger, of course, is that the muscle has to go anaerobic. And if it goes anaerobic to top up its energy levels, it produces lactic acid, and this is going to contribute towards fatigue and the limitation of exercise.